Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Unsustainable Wednesdays, our favorite episode of the week, and boy, are there a lot of people to talk about. I'm your host, Gamby, with my co-host, Brandon, and we are going to take you through some players that are unsustainably high, unsustainably low. We've got big-name players, we've got little-name players, we've got no-name players. Actually, wait, we don't have no-name players, but we do have lots of players. So let's start off first with unsustainably high, and I'll let you take your first one.
Sure. So my first one here is a player that I feel like has been added quite a bit lately. Got quite a few questions on because of the shakeup going on in Pittsburgh with injuries, just as it always is over there. And that's Brian Rust. Left wing, right wing, 16%. He's got 7 points in 6 games played this season, so I can understand why everybody's excited. 5 goals in that same span. Brian Rust is a really fast player. If you've seen him play, he always seems like he should be getting more points than he is anyway. But what's happening right now doesn't make any sense. So Brian Rust is always a kind of low time on ice guy. Like him getting above 16 minutes is pretty great, which he isn't. So he's on the season, he's sitting at the high 14s. As far as most recently, since Crosby's been out, it's going a bit above that, but still nothing spectacular. His shots are nothing spectacular, but his shooting percentage, he's at 40%. So, which is, I guess, obvious considering how many goals he has. He's only expected to have around 2 goals. He's got 5. Everything is basically double or more where it should be. And I know that his wraparound goal was, you can just watch his wraparound goal, and that's kind of like the one against the Islanders. Of course, I know about this goal, right? As a reflection of what's happening right now. Like the fact that goal went in was pretty nuts. And the fact that Brian Rust is where he is, even despite his deployment, is pretty nuts. He's not going to get power play time. Even with all the shakeup, he's seeing below 20% in the most recent weeks. So he might see some power play 2 time, but it's not really going to make much of a difference. His on ice shooting is 20%, which is crazy. This is like Schmaltz level stuff. And yeah, I think that he makes an all right streamer option when you have off nights and whatnot, but he's not somebody that you should pick up and hold and expect anything that's happening right now to continue. There's nothing there to back it up, despite how kind of flashy he looks from time to time.
Yep. My next one here is going to be Travis Konechny on the Philadelphia Flyers. I had Brian Rust as well. Travis Konechny is currently shooting at 20%, and he's on a 92-point pace. He actually looks really, really good and seems to have taken a big step up this season. Last year, he was on about a 62-point pace. So to me, who Travis Konechny is when you bring everything down to sustainable levels, to me, he's more of like a 70-point guy. I think that's who he could be this year, very realistically. And that would be really good for him. That'd be a huge step up from last year. And so he's definitely rosterable. But from the perspective of if you get trades for him, or if you're thinking of packaging him or anything like that, I wouldn't expect a 82, 90-point pace from him or that kind of a player. I would more assume in your own head, he's more of a 70-point guy, and then you're going to make out a little bit better.
Okay, my next one is Alex Pietrangelo. Now, what he's doing late, he has 16 points in 18 games, but he has 6 in his last 3. He has just gone off. And as I do like Pietrangelo, he was a guy I kind of pointed out as possibly getting back to that 50-point mark, which he hasn't been to in some time, if ever, actually. But what's happening right now is just insane. Like, for him to be getting 2 points a game and just lighting it up on the power play, which is missing Tarasenko, as we all know. His numbers are not going to stay this crazy. I think selling high is a great opportunity for him right now, considering he's been so strong for a pretty good period of time now, getting a lot of points in these last, couple of weeks. But yeah, it's as much as I like him, he can't keep this up. His on ice shooting is not that crazy, but it is a little inflated at about, in the last week, it's at 14%. On his season, it's 12.5%. I do like that he's seeing more time on ice, or rather more power play percentage, but it's really not that much more compared to last season. And everything else seems more or less in line, but the goals are the big difference. He's shooting 12%, which is not going to happen for a defenseman. And Yeah, I really do like the idea of trying to sell high. I've seen a lot of people mentioning him. And when I see a lot of people mentioning a player, it usually is coming from both sides. Do I acquire this player? Do I sell this player? And considering how much I'm seeing his name mentioned in trade discussions in Discord and Twitter and wherever else, makes me think that a lot of people must be interested. So I think now is a good time to try to move him for an upgrade of some kind, whether that means a different forward or an upgrade in defense, somebody that's struggling. I think it's worth it. Especially considering it seems like people are really, really low on guys like Erik Karlsson, which understandably he's been pretty bad. But I would move Pietrangelo for Erik Karlsson. The upside is just not even remotely the same.
So how about this trade? I just traded for Pietrangelo. Although I agree with you, I think he's unsustainably high from a points perspective. He's not going to be as good as he is right now. I still think that at best, especially my league is hits and blocks, at best he's a top 50 defenseman. Cool. At worst, who I acquired Pietrangelo as my fourth defenseman, I think third or fourth best defenseman. So the upside is nice to have, and I'd say at worst he ends up being kind of like around that 100 to 20 range. So my trade ended up being I acquired Ehlers and Pietrangelo for Horvat and Kopitar.
I think it's fine. Kopitar and Horvat are both playing really well right now. Horvat, I've talked about Horvat in the last episode, I think, about how I think that Horvat is possibly he's doing a little too much right now on the power play, and that his even strength points aren't really there to back everything up. So, yeah, the trade sounds fine to me. Ehlers, I also like Ehlers lately because as much as Wheeler centering that second line is kind of a problem for fantasy owners of Wheeler because he doesn't get that elite kind of top line stuff. And they're splitting up the power play, which is also bad news for Wheeler. It's good news for Ehlers. He's finally getting a good center. And he's going to be playing more power play time, most likely, because I assume they're going to split that up. So I think the trade makes sense. I don't think you gave up too much for Pietrangelo. I just think that it seems like people are going to be able to get more, possibly, for him selling Pietrangelo right now, just from the interest I've seen on him. But again, like, even though I'm calling him unsustainably high because it's sort of obvious over the last few weeks anyway, I don't think that he's like going to be, I don't think he's going to go back to like last season's like 45-ish point pace or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like this is here to stay, just it's a little bit crazy. And also, I think the other thing to note there is that when we talk about someone selling high, sometimes also you can take advantage of that on the flip side and try to buy in a perspective where you're selling guys that you don't necessarily need, or that you're selling high as well, and try to also buy high on a guy who you think just has more upside. For example, I sold Kopitar and Horvat with the idea that, okay, look, they're centers that I don't need. On top of that, they're playing a little bit too well, right? And you can sell that for a guy like Pietrangelo, who the person thinks, oh, I'm making out like a bandit here with, selling Pietrangelo high. And to me, it's like, whatever. It's like, to me, it's not a sell high or buy low, right? You're both buying high players from each other, but to me, Pietrangelo is worth more as a defenseman. But that's the flip side of that as well, is you can also use that knowledge too. Okay, my last one here is going to be Philippe Myers, shooting at 30%, 37.5% over his last 4 games. Great minutes, actually. There's a lot to be excited here with this kid. He looks really, really good. I've watched a few Flyers games, and he really looks to be clicking with the offense. He kind of reminds me of Travis Konechny a little bit in the sense of how he clicks and how he plays. So the minutes are fantastic. His shots are starting to go up a little bit each game, it seems. He's starting to get a little bit more confident, and that's good. That being said, pucks are going in a little bit too much. His on-ice shooting percentage is also a tad high at 13.5%. And on top of that, he's getting absolutely no power play time. So he is getting added a lot. People are very excited about him. But at the moment, I'd say he's more of a deeper league add and just kind of wait. But if you want to add him early, that's fine. Just remember that this shooting percentage is wildly unsustainable. I mean, that's Brian Rust numbers of shooting percentage there, and will come down. So don't expect an insane player like he is right now. Just expect, he's going to be a good point producer if he keeps that deployment. And that's also a big question, of course, as well, is does he keep that deployment? But while he's getting these 18, 20 minutes a game, yeah, I like him. But that being said, his goals are a little bit.
My last one is, and don't panic, JT Miller. Now I'm being a little ahead of kind of the news on this one. I've seen that he's skating in practice alongside Horvat, which with Levo skating with Pettersson and Besser. I can see why they'd be doing that over Vancouver, trying to spark something at even strength from Horvat, but I can't see that as anything but negative for Miller, who's meshed so well with that Pettersson and Besser line. Now, assuming that this line change does not happen, I actually really like what Miller's doing. I've picked him up in a few leagues. I think like the window of picking him up is pretty much gone. All of his numbers look great. His shooting percentage is a little high, but beyond that, like nothing's like a crazy outlier or anything. And the biggest obvious difference here is his huge increase in time on ice, which was one of the things that was always holding Miller back. You combine that with actually being able to play on the power play significantly, and you've got a player that can actually do something, especially in hits leagues where he's getting a bunch of hits on top of everything else. But if he does play with that Horvat line, I don't necessarily think he's going to get the same opportunities. They do like to play the Besser line really offensively, and the Horvat line, while still typically deployed in the offensive zone, it's not the same. They deploy that Besser, Pettersson, Miller line like 80-something% into the offensive zone, which means ignoring neutral zone faceoffs, he plays 80%, basically 4 out of every 5 faceoffs will be on the offensive zone for him. With Horvat, it's about 67, so 2 out of every 3. Still good, but it's not the same. So you combine all this stuff, you got Horvat who's playing slightly more defensively, and then he loses an elite winger on the other side, where originally he had, Besser and Pettersson. Now he's only got Horvat, and Horvat has not been that great at even strength. He's been good on the power play, but his even strength numbers have been like kind of just okay. So I think that's the big thing. If he stays on that Horvat line, I still like him, but I don't think he can keep up this point per game pace on that line. I think he'll still be good. I think a 65, 70 point pace is still pretty in line, even if he stays with Horvat for the rest of the season. But if he stays with that Pettersson Besser line, he can go north of that, I think.
Okay, moving into Unsustainably Low and guys that should be doing better. I'm going to start here with Mark Stone, one of the people that everyone was so excited about at the beginning of the season, and now that line, everyone's wondering what to do with him. So I think it's a little bit of overreaction. When you look at the whole season, Mark Stone is still on a 78-point pace and actually has a slight uptick in shots from last year. The issue is that over his past 4 games, the last 7 days, he has no points to show for it, low shooting, actual numbers, and only 3.7% on-ice shooting. And when you look at that whole line, everyone has kind of suffered from that. And so right now, they're just in a little bit of a slump.
Except Patches. God, I love me some Patches.
I know. Just, you know what's happening right now? There's a leak in the Vegas Golden Knights, and they don't have anything to do but to patch it. It's the only thing you can do right now.
Oh my God,
so
you stop.
Sorry,
folks. This is the end of the Fantasy Hockey Podcast after that horrible pun.
That's not even a pun. That's a literal analogy that actually works with patches.
It does.
It does. When you have a leak, you patch it.
I'm sorry, folks. I truly apologize.
Anyways, the issue is that you can't put a stone on the leak. You got to put a patch on the leak. So until the leak is fixed, Mark Stone's not going to figure it out.
I'm trying so hard not to claw my own eyes out right now. I just...
Yeah. Look, okay, at the end of the day, the message with Mark Stone is be patient. He'll be fine. And the same holds true for Stastny, because Stastny is kind of tied to that line. That line in general has been struggling. Vegas in general has sort of been struggling to score goals, except unless I guess your name is William Karlsson. But even then, their shooting percentage is still low over these last few games. And so it's okay. They had a huge start to the season, and so they're a little over-indexed at the beginning. And at the end, here now, they just aren't doing as well. So just be patient. You're going to go through these lulls in the season. And so Stone,
I promise not to make any, I don't know what those were, jokes, I guess.
They were facts. They were facts. That it was like a DIY podcast mixed with construction, mixed with fantasy hockey.
Anyway, my first one is Thomas Chabot.
I had him too.
Yeah. His everything about him is pointing positive, except basically his point production. He's got more time on ice. He's got a significantly higher shot pace. His Corsi's really good. His power play percentage is really good. His offensive zone starts are increasing at about 67% now. there's nothing is missing except for the kind of things that don't make sense. His shooting percentage is really low, even for a defenseman. Last year he shot 7%. Let's assume that's high. He's gonna be more like a 5% defenseman. Which according to his goals, his expected goals, he should be about a 5% defenseman. He's currently 2%, so he's missing a goal. But also just his on ice shooting is super low. It's 8% on the season compared to 12% last season. I mean, of course, you contribute some of that to the players, but still. The other concerning thing lately, in his last week, he's only got like below 20% IPP. And again, if you don't know what IPP is, it's basically the amount of goals that are scored when you're on the ice that you are part of. So if you got an assist or a goal on a goal scored while you were standing on the ice, then your IPP increases. If you miss that, then you don't get that. So let's say you get an assist on one goal and then the next goal goes in, you get nothing on it, you're 50% IPP. So he got 16% over last week. So he just managed not to be part of all the goals scored somehow, which is unusual for him. Last season, he was about 50%, which is typical for a decent defenseman. And on the season, he's actually 50%. So season long, his numbers make kind of sense on that. But everything points to him should be doing better. His on-ice shooting should be probably closer, I would say probably closer to 9 to 10%. So that just alone is going to give him a couple more assists probably. And then we already said he's missing a goal. So he should be pretty good. He should be in that like 60-point range, which is about where we projected him, if I remember right. Last year he was a little too high, getting 64 and 70, but I think he should pace at 60 points, which still to me, despite what's happening so far, sounds like the right number.
My last one here, because you took Chabot from me, we are in sync recently. I think there's something happening here. I think we're starting to connect brains in ways that we never have before.
I hope not.
Tyler Seguin, concerning 25% decrease in shots over the season. That's not great. But the thing is that all of Dallas is kind of seeing that, unless your name is Alexander Radulov, in which case, I guess you shoot more. But Jamie Benn's seen a decrease. Joe Pavelski's seen a decrease. Tyler Seguin has seen a decrease. I think it's just an overall system thing in Dallas that it's not really allowing players to get a lot of shots off. Maybe it's because they are being tortured for putting Corey Perry on the fourth line when he obviously should be on the top line. Tyler Seguin has a 5.45% shooting, a 7.43% on-ice shooting. It's all low. And I would say that Tyler Seguin is going to turn it around here. He's never been really a high shooting percentage kind of guy. But the thing is that when you shoot as much as Tyler Seguin does, a difference from 5% shooting to 8% shooting is massive. And so for him to get up to that 8%, we're going to need to see a lot of goals. And I'm confident we will. But the problem is, as well, you're not going to be expecting as many goals as last year if that shooting totals stay down. So Tyler Seguin is both slightly worrying and also very, very unsustainably low. But to me, it's tough to recommend doing anything with him. I wouldn't buy low, I don't think, right now. And I, on top of that, also wouldn't really sell. And so he's in this weird spot of just kind of leave him be and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. I mean, I've thought about targeting Seguin, but it's like I don't know. I'm scared.
It's the same as Klingberg, right? Like, would we call Klingberg a buy low at the moment? I don't know. I don't know. Think I would, but I also wouldn't necessarily trade or drop him yet. Because the upside is just so high, right? I always like to think that there's guys that you die with. There's certain guys that you're never going to get the value that they're worth, and you just kind of die with them. And especially if you're winning, I would rather take that upside in these kinds of guys than the potential of trading them low and not getting any upside back. And Tyler Seguin is 100% that instance. And honestly, a lot of Dallas is like that, in which right now we don't know what the hell is going on. And it's neither a buy situation or a sell situation.
Yep. All right, my next one is Nikolai Ehlers.
I like this one.
Yeah. So I already kind of hinted at what's going on. He is due for more power play time, I think, with the shakeup. We're already seeing it. So the last week, which is basically when they started doing that Wheeler thing, he's right around 50%, which is a huge increase on his last year where he was 25%, which makes sense because now they're doing 1A, 1B-ish. He's actually a little high on goals at the moment, but on the season, his point pace is great. 14 and 18, you can't really expect much more out of Ehlers. It's just lately, he hasn't really been doing anything. And I think we should see more out of him. He's a big shooter that hasn't really changed much. Last season, he only shot 210, but I think with the increased ice time he's seeing, which he is seeing, last season he played under 16 minutes or so. This season he's playing 17 plus. And we're seeing a 264 shot pace out of him, which is better than 3 a game, which is great. His shooting percentage is in line. His on-ice shooting is lower than it should be at 7%. He looks good. And I think this last few games of getting goose eggs everywhere are absolutely not going to hold up, especially considering I really like that he's getting that top line or that power play opportunity. Even if it's only 50%, it's a lot better than 25. And I've got one more. Jake Gensel. I honestly, he wasn't even on my radar until I heard somebody asking about possibly moving him. And I was like, why are people even, what's happening? And I looked into it, and he's been slow for a little bit here. Just getting a point here and there as opposed to his normal torrid pace that he started with. Now, obviously, losing Crosby is not going to help that much, but his 14 and 17 is more or less what I expected for him season long. So this last couple weeks of being slow is not something I expect to go on. He's kind of in the same position as Ehlers, except with all the numbers bumped up a bit. So instead of skating 19 minutes, he's skating 21 to 22. Instead of shooting at 227, he's shooting at 270 per pace. So everything, and then just like Ehlers, his shooting percentage is a little bit down, which is understandable because he shot at 18% last season. It's not really sustainable. And everything else looks in line. He's also got that increased power play percentage that we talked about with Ehlers. He's basically Ehlers except better for this season. All of his numbers are very similar, except everything's bumped up slightly. So it's kind of understandable that they're slowing down at the same time for who knows why. But I do expect an increase from him, even without Crosby, although having Crosby is going to help a lot. But I still think that he's going to be fine regardless.
Okay, now we move into Sustainably High. The first guy I did not expect to have on this list at all this season. I'll admit I was wrong. I'll openly admit it. I was wrong on this. Did not expect it to actually work, and that's Kevin Shattenkirk.
Oh boy.
I didn't expect it.
Feels weird.
It feels very weird. When you look at the decor in Tampa, this shouldn't be happening. That's the funny thing, is it doesn't really make sense. I would have expected Chernak to have a better season. I would have expected Sergachev to have a better season. And I'll give it to him. He has stepped up. Shots are up 38% from last year. Ice time is up on the season, but it's been decreasing as of late, yet points have gone up somehow. So I'm a little confused, but hey, sure, go off Kevin Shattenkirk. On-ice shooting percentage isn't too insane. His shooting percentage is also not that crazy. There's a very real possibility he's a 60-point defenseman with very low power play points. I think it's a safer bet to say he's more of a 50-55 point guy, but he does have that upside. I know it's crazy, but when you look at the numbers, it's not that insane to think if he keeps deployment. That's the big key. The key thing is deployment. If he gets usurped by Sergachev or Chernak, then no. But right now, it's not that crazy.
I still am very against the idea of any non-power play one defenseman getting above 55. Even getting above 50 is ridiculous. It doesn't happen.
I normally would say that, but I think that on a team like Tampa, who's so good, I could see it. But the thing is, I will say this. The thing with Kevin Shattenkirk is that the floor could fall out from under him at any time if they decide to do different things, if his deployment falls. For example, these last few games, he's on like a 120 point pace with 15 minutes of average time on ice, or 16 minutes of average time on ice, something around there. So those are minutes that are not sustainable to 120 points, right? So if he continues to play 15, 16 minutes, then that floor falls out like crazy. And now you're looking at a ceiling that's lower, and also the floor falls far lower from a peripheral perspective as well. So he's a dangerous guy. He's a guy who, if you're grabbed off waivers, I'd just hold, because unless you can get, I mean, unless your league is ridiculous enough to have, like, let's say Eric Carlson for Kevin Shattenkirk trade, then sure, like that, that kind of situation, fine. But quite frankly, like Kevin Shattenkirk is probably your fourth, fifth defenseman, your last defenseman you picked off waivers, and sure, like hold, but I wouldn't be trading for him. I personally wouldn't trade for him, but I'd hold.
I feel like he's Sagan, except going the opposite direction.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you wouldn't trade for him. You probably wouldn't trade him. And he's just now your guy.
Yeah. He's just a guy who does have good upside. But, I've seen a lot of questions, I think, recently of one, should I trade for him? I've seen a lot of crazy trades for Kevin Shattenkirk. And on the flip side, I've seen a lot of people saying, should I trade him away? And almost all the trades in which I've seen Kevin Shattenkirk get traded away, I'd say it's a net negative for kind of both sides. But usually when I ask and I'm like, okay, well, who's on your team? Where are they actually going to fit in on your defense? All this. I'm like, this is kind of bad for both of you. I don't know. It's weird. So I just don't advocate really trading Kevin Shattenkirk. I'd maybe shop him around, see if anyone would pay high. But he's kind of like Victor Olofsson at the beginning of the season, right? When we talked about him, we were like, if you can get a really high price for him, then sure. But the odds of you actually getting that are probably quite low.
Yeah, it just comes with when there's such unknowns on a player like that. Like, if you deal him that early, you need to get high upside because there's a decent chance he continues to be good for the rest of the season. And then, like, you just sold early on a guy that's going to keep it up. And it's better to take the risk.
Yep.
And I'm risk averse, but I still would probably not traded him.
To me, when you have like a third or fourth defenseman with this kind of upside, that's where I'm happy to take on risk. Because at worst, he's a waiver guy that spot was already a waiver position, right? Like that was already a streaming position. At best, you're getting a guy who's really worth second defenseman value. And that swing as a fourth defenseman is awesome. That's exactly what I go for from a waiver pickup.
Yep. All right. My first one is Jacob Chikrin.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that I mentioned at the beginning of the season that I like this guy a lot and I shouldn't, and now I get to like him anyway. He's actually... I'll start off with kind of the bad news. He's actually scoring too much. He has 4 goals. He's only expected to have 2. His shooting percentage is a little too high. But things are trending in a good direction for him. He's shooting more than usual, up 11% on the year from last year. His on ice is still pretty reasonable. His on ice shooting percentage is still pretty reasonable. But the big thing that I like is that his power play percentage is increasing. He's got top power play, at least for now, although it hasn't really clicked yet. But I've always hoped that we'd see a little bit more of Chikrin on the top power play. They played around with it last season with him and OEL up there, but it looks like they're giving him the sole quarterback spot on the primary power play, although they maybe do a 1A, 1B with a 2 defenseman stack on the second power play, which makes sense because it seems like the current point scoring is more from their quote-unquote secondary players, Connor Garland and what have you. But I do think that he'll see a little bit above 50% as long as he's playing that like top-ish power play. And that hopefully will be able to unleash a little bit of his potential, which he's had since forever. And at 8%, like that's a good flyer, especially on a week like this where you have, 2 more off nights to play with him.
Definitely. My next one is going to be Willie Nylander, 14.9% shooting, a little bit high, but honestly, he's never been a great shooter. And so this may be someone that we don't really know very well. He's never clicked with someone like Matthews for so long, right? 9.5% on ice shooting. Power play percentage is up, as is power play time on ice due to Toronto getting more penalties this year. I wouldn't expect that many more power play points out of him. But at 5-on-5, he's looking really, really good. And he seems to seriously be clicking with Matthews. And if you click with Matthews, you could be pretty dangerous. And so to me, Willie Nylander is definitely sustainably high and someone that if he's available in your league, I'd take a look because I know he's not that highly owned. And I've seen some people ask if he's worth a grab. I would not. Okay, if you haven't listened to Brandon's stack video, you'll understand why I'm saying even though that pair is electric, you don't necessarily want to go trading for Willie Nylander just because you have Matthews. I've seen a lot of that.
Right.
I've seen a lot
of... He's also 84% owned, by the way.
Oh, okay, 84%. So in shallow leagues, he might be available. Like very shallow leagues, he might be available. But I've seen a lot of questions about, I have Matthews. Should I go get Nylander and get the stack? No, don't do that. It's fine. What I'm saying here is Nylander is sustainably high. I'm high on him rest of season. I wouldn't be trying. This is not a guy that I would say sell high on right now. Although, if there's a Toronto fan in your in your league, that may be a place to try to sell to for really high. But I would say Willie Nylander is sustainably high. I'm not going to be looking at selling high on him or trying to advocate for you to quickly move off because anything's unsustainable. It all makes sense.
Gotta love Leafs fans.
Yep, gotta love it.
All right, my next one is Adam Fox. 3%. This is kind of following a similar idea, right? Fox is getting that top power play shot and he's doing something with it, and that's kind of like end of topic. So for a guy at 3%, I don't necessarily think he's going to keep up a point per game pace like he has over the last week, because that's insane. But the idea that he can continue to produce and be fantasy relevant while he's got that top power play slot, I think is pretty reasonable. It's a matter of how long he keeps it. That's the big question, because who knows? We've seen D'Angelo, Trouba, everybody's floating around up and down from there. But in deep leagues, especially 3% owned, like it's hard to find a top power play quarterback that is actually performing on that top power play and be available in leagues like that are looking for 3% guys. So if you're looking for a 3% guy, I think Fox is definitely worth a spin, at least for the time being. His ice time is also increasing quite a bit. He's playing around 17 minutes a game for most of the season. Over the last week, he's up around 20, 19 and a half to 20. So all looks positive for him. I really, really like the fact that he's on top power play, but we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I mean, daily faceoff right now shows Tony D'Angelo is still up there. But if you actually take a look at deployment, the last 2 games, Adam Fox has been the top power play. So Tony D'Angelo is so last week. That's last week. Who knows who it'll be next week? Maybe it'll be Libor Hayek. Who knows? That's another big thing with Adam Fox is there's been, like you said, so many different power play quarterbacks. Who knows who's going to be the power play quarterback tomorrow or in the next week? Who knows? I expect Trouba to get it back at some point, so I don't expect Fox to be a long-term ad. But in the meantime, like you said, I think the key is at any time that you're picking up Rangers, it's always who's on the top power play. And in this situation, Fox, the other thing that's really interesting about Fox is everyone's paying attention to Tony D'Angelo. And everyone is doing that because Tony D'Angelo is getting all the hype. He's getting all the ads. He's the one on people's radars. That's who people's talking about, even though, like I said, so last week. But Adam Fox is the one that's actually on top power play. That's the one you should actually be paying attention to. And so you actually get the luxury as well of seeing when you can actually play Adam Fox and pick him up then, because the odds of someone actually picking him up in your league are not that high because everyone's paying attention to Tony D'Angelo and Daily Faceoff has it wrong. And Adam Fox is actually top power play. So that's another.
I will say that I feel like Daily Faceoff has been a little slow with some of the line changes lately.
Yeah.
Like they last updated the Rangers on the 9th. Like things have changed.
I mean, to be fair, though, who can actually keep up with David Quinn?
True.
It's almost impossible. So I'm going to stick here with a young defenseman as well, and Cale Makar. So if you'll remember, we called Cale Makar unsustainably high a few weeks ago, and I would go back and do that again. I would still call him unsustainably high at the time that we did. His 5-on-5 deployment was not fantastic. His shooting was down a ton with a very high shooting percentage and high on-ice shooting percentage. And since then, in these last few days and weeks, he's gotten a lot better. And a lot of things have become into sustainable categories in which I would trade for him now if this continues. The crazy thing is, so there's 2 sides of the coin on the Landeskog and Rantanen thing being out. On one hand, it's good for him, actually, because it means he touches the puck more and the puck goes through him more, as opposed to when it's Landeskog, Rantanen, it's Landeskog, Rantanen, McKinnon moving the puck all the time together, and Makar may not get in on it as much. On the flip side of that, it makes the whole team better, which should make him better and have more points on the ice that he can get involved in, right? So it's 2 sides of the coin when Rantanen and Landeskog get back. I'm not ready to say it's good for him, and I'm not ready to say it's bad for him just yet. I would assume it's good for him that they come back, but again, we don't know. The biggest thing, though, is his shot totals. Over the season, he's on a 174 shot pace over the season. If you look at his last 14 games, the last 30 days, he's on a 211 shot pace. If you look at just his last 3 games or the last week, he's at a 355 shot pace. That's Brent Burns numbers. Now, with the minutes he's getting, I don't think that's that sustainable. And especially once Rottinen and Landeskog come back, the shot share will come down for Makar, and it'll be kind of distributed a little bit better between McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rottinen. But man, if he can keep those shot totals up, whew, we are looking at an elite fantasy defenseman. But that's a big thing to watch with him, is if those shot totals come up, because this is a very recent thing. It's not like he's been doing this and then had a little bit of a dip. Nope, this is very recent. And so it's just something to pay attention to. But he could be an interesting trade target at some point if those shots continue, because he may be worth what the owner would think would be an overpay, but really you're buying a proper value.
Yeah, I almost had him on mine as well, but I didn't want to have 3 defensemen for my Sustainably High. So I decided to go with my last one here, David Perron. Now, Perron, actually, looking a little closer to him, reminds me a lot of what Horvat's doing. He's getting a lot of success on the power play and then kind of replicating-ish that on the even strength numbers. So half of his points right now are coming from the power play, which is probably a little bit too much. But and his shooting percentage is a little high. But the fact of the matter is, with Tarasenko out, we've seen an ice time increase for him. He's shooting more than ever. That's the biggest difference. He's 35% on the season above his normal shooting pace. But over the last week, basically since Tarasenko's been out, he's shooting even more than that. A 320-point pace. I mean, obviously, we're talking about 3 games, so it's not really saying a whole lot, but he's shooting a lot, which is great to see. He's starting in the offensive zone a little more often, and he's getting a lot more power play percentage, which is reflected in him getting a lot of power play points. Now, like I said, just like Horvat, I think his power play pace is going to come down a little bit. I think his goals are going to come down a little bit unless he keeps shooting like he is. And I think his assists are likely to come up a little bit. So I do like a lot what he's doing. And as long as he continues to get this kind of deployment, he's going to be pretty valuable. It seems like everybody's kind of got the message, though. He's already 81% owned. He was a free agent in a lot of leagues maybe a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, I among other people, have scooped him up as quickly as possible. So that's Perron for you. I really like him going forward, especially considering, Senko's not going to be back anytime soon. So they should continue to run with Perron as well as he's doing.
Yep, I agree with that one too. I'm pretty high on Perron rest of season. Sustainably low time. Let's talk about the bums. Oh boy, do I have a good one for you here. Jamie Benn.
Yep, I have him too.
Yep, it's time. His shots are down 13% again. Remember, his shots went down a ton last year. Shooting percentage is an insanely low 3%, sure. But because his shots are so low, it's only the difference of 3 or 4 goals for him. And if you give him the goals and assists that he should get, because his on-ice shooting percentage is low as well, just because Dallas as a whole is shooting less, if you give him the assists he should get with the shots that he's on the ice for and those goals, he's only on a 50-point pace.
Yikes.
It's not good. His ice time is also down again, 8%. He's nearing second/third line time. He's kind of like a borderline second to third line player. He's probably a 50 to 60 point guy. And if this whole Dallas fiasco continues, I'd assume he's closer to 50 to 55. He was called out by Jim Montgomery again. I don't really see a way forward for Jamie Benn anymore. I hope you didn't use a very high pick on him. Peripherals also aren't that great. His hits are up a little bit, but yeah, to me, he's a 50 to 60 point guy, assuming 50 to 55. He's a guy that I would say immediately try to sell on name value alone. But the thing is, I don't really even know if he holds that much name value anymore. I think he's now known as one of the most disappointing or quickest fall off from an age perspective in recent times. And everyone sort of agrees on that. So I don't know how much you can get for him, but I would try. I mean, I wouldn't sell just because you want to get rid of him, but I would definitely try to sell. And with, the understanding that he is probably at best a 60-point player. And if you can get better than that, you're...
Yeah, definitely.
Here's an interesting one. Would you trade, for example, Jamie Benn for Travis Konechny? I would. In a points-only league, I would.
In a points-only league, maybe. In a full Cats league, I'd probably take the upside on Ben.
Yeah, I think it would
I've
depend.
never been a huge Konechny fan. I don't know.
I don't know if I use that as like Konechny is probably like a waiver guy in most leagues, or was a waiver guy. It's interesting. There's a lot of good targets for Ben that you could go after that are going to give you better options, but yeah, I'm not high on Ben rest of season.
Yeah. Okay, so my first one is Jacob Trouba. Yeah, he's 88% owned, I understand. Now the thing is, there's a couple things to think about with Trouba. If you picked him up with the idea that he was going to be 50-55 point guy, which is kind of what I thought he'd be, considering I expected him to be top power play the whole time, and he got 50 points last season and all this good stuff. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case anymore unless he gets back that top power play spot very, very soon, which I don't necessarily bank on anymore. The thing is, he's still going to provide you with great peripherals. So if you're in a peripheral league, like obviously he still has value. He's blocking a ton at almost 200 block pace. His hits are way up. He's over a 200 hit pace. So he's got all this like nice stuff. His shots are also way up. He's at a 240 shot pace. So he's basically playing like a Darnell Nurse without the pims. So that's great. He's actually like his blocks being that high are just crazy. He's one of the best peripheral defensemen at the moment. But if you're in a league where you really needed his power play points, his point upside, I think right now what you see is what you get. I think you're going to get something more like, I don't know. I don't see how he gets much above like 35, 40 points pace if he doesn't get that top power play. It doesn't really seem like he's going to find a way to do that. But then again, the odds of him getting back that top power play are fairly high at some point.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, I don't necessarily think you should consider him an elite point getter, but he's still going to be an elite peripheral guy. So just bear all that stuff in mind when you're thinking about his valuation going forward.
Yeah, I picked him up actually off waivers in one of my leagues. He was dropped, and I was able to get him as a waiver. And so as a waiver guy, he is incredible. So if he is dropped and you have peripherals in your league, he has an awesome floor with decent upside, especially as he's now my fourth or fifth defenseman. Like, that's incredible upside for a fourth or fifth defenseman. And that's how you have to think about it a little bit, is that's great value. And so that's why I picked him up off waivers still. And even in my points league, which it doesn't give as many points to hits, blocks, and shots, he still gets like 1.5 points each night, which is a great floor for a defenseman when normally you're just picking up defensemen who you're hoping have a swing of 0 points or 2 points because of an assist. So I'll take that from a Jacob Trouba any day. And honestly, I could see him as being a buy low candidate if an owner is really frustrated with him and maybe on the verge of dropping. You're like, hey, let me get him before you drop him, sort of thing. Sure, you get peripherals and you get a good floor and you don't have to pay much. In that regard, I like him as a buy low. But I wouldn't be buying, like you said, at like a 50-point defenseman anymore. Speaking of defensemen, my next one here is someone who makes it on this list. I swear he makes it on this list every single year. Every single year we need to talk about this guy, and that's Mikhail Sergachev. Mm-hmm. Every year. I don't know why people still draft him. And the funny thing is, people this year didn't draft him. I feel like we all went into the draft with the agreement that Mikhail Sergachev is not draftable. I feel like we all went in with that agreement. I feel like we were all on the same page for once. And then he started getting points. People picked him up. And now everyone's like, why isn't Sergachev doing stuff? This is Mikhail Sergachev, folks. This is who he is. But anyways, he is at a 0% shooting. So he is due some goals. But his shots are down from last year. And what's hilarious is that with this point pace, everyone's kind of wondering what he's doing. His on-ice shooting percentage is actually high. And his IPP is not far off from what he's gotten in years prior. So that's hilarious to me, considering people are freaking out about him, and his on-ice shooting percentage is actually over-indexed. He's the same guy he was last year, a 35 to 40 point guy at best, and nothing more.
My last one is another defenseman, very similar to Trouba, and that's Alexander Edler.
Ooh, this hurts.
Yeah, it's the same deal. His point pace is just. That said, we kind of expected this one, I think. We never really expected Edler to have top power play all season. So if you have Edler, it probably has to do with his peripherals, at least to an extent, which are still, pretty decent. He's on a 237 block pace. He's one of the best blockers in the game. His hits are a little bit down, but really not that big of a deal. So he's another one of those guys that just kind of gets you the peripherals, and then the points come when they come. But him being off that top power play is going to seriously limit his point upside and his Obviously, his power play point upside. So that's basically where I'm coming at. Like him being 79% owned seems high because I know that not everybody plays in leagues that count blocks, for example. So if you're expecting him to be, again, like a 50-point defenseman, just that's not going to happen. He's probably going to be, mid to high 30s, possibly breaking the 40-point barrier, but I don't see him going above 45. And he'll get you good peripherals, but the shots aren't really going to be there. He's like a, not a bad shooter, but he's like 180, something like that, shots. And then the blocks and the hits are where you're really going to pick up value from him. But if those aren't valuable to you, then Edler's probably not that valuable to you. And I don't think he's valuable in 80% of leagues right now.
Yep, I'd agree with that. Unfortunately, it's the truth. My last one here is going to be James Neal. His shot pace is way down over the last 7 and 30 days. Like from what happened at the beginning of the season to where he's at now, he's a completely different player. His minutes are still low and decreasing, so not a big fan of deployment. His shooting percentage is actually back in line, but with way lower shot totals. And I should say that his shooting percentage is in line over the last 30 and 7 days. Those first few games were just so crazy. And his on-ice shooting percentage has also kind of come back down to normal since the early season craziness. So, and when you adjust for all of that and you look at what his paces are for these last 7 and 30 days, he's like a 40-point guy. That's pretty much it, which is what we expected, right? He might benefit from times on the power play. But look, it's time to dump and really just use him as a streamer only at this point.
I'm kind of honestly disappointed in the Oilers for not leaving him on that on the top power play, or not top power play, on the top line. I still think I guess Cassian works well enough. Yeah, he was pretty good last week, but I do think Neal's the most dangerous winger, and they could really fill that line up by putting him up there. But then again, it doesn't seem like, I feel like Draisaitl and McDavid could play with no winger on their side and be fine. So maybe it doesn't matter, but would have been good news for Neal anyway.
And before we sign off here, we will not touch the Don Cherry Sportsnet thing. It's not our place. Many people out there have said things far more eloquently than we could and covered it far better. But I do want to say one thing, and I leave you with a quote from Martin Luther King: "Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night devoid already of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And so go out there and seriously practice acceptance, love, and compassion for other people. Hockey is truly for everyone. And we will catch you for the weekend preview on Friday.
Thanks for listening.